Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm Jason.
I'm Zach.
And today we're going to be talking about tech news and tech tips.
In the news today, Google Chrome is moving away from third-party cookies. They plan to turn to browser-based machine learning to track your browsing history and target ads towards you. This is basically, in a sense, a different way to target ads instead of using the third-party cookies. Some think this will harm small advertising firms that use third-party cookies, and Apple has been limiting cookie tracking since 2017, and Firefox allows users to completely block them since 2019. I'm not sure when Brave popped up, but they've been blocking cookies if you choose to since that browser came out.
Right, and it just seems like Google's using this as a way around the third-party cookies to be able to still track and not have to use cookies. The European Union passed some new legislation in favor of right to repair. This mainly currently applies towards more of appliance space like washers, dryers, items like that, but they're going to enforce, they want them to work for 10 years as well as include a repair manual, and the UK will be adopting these rules soon to hope to cut down on electrical waste and e-waste. I really like to see this. I want to see this some more in different devices, even if it's just like 5 years for a cell phone or 3 years for a cell phone, but I really enjoy the right to repair movement.
Apple is discontinuing their iMac Pro desktop. The $4,999 desktop will continue to be sold while supplies last. Once they're gone, they're going to be gone for good. They're still going to be selling their 3 MacBooks, and the base model iMac are still available.
Yeah, that's the cheese grater looking one, I believe. Is it the one that looks like a cheese grater? It's really expensive, and I guess they might have sold some, but definitely going to be discontinuing because it wasn't getting the sales I think that they wanted to see. Next item, Microsoft has been granted an approval by the EU to acquire Bethesda, parent company ZeniMax Media. Bethesda is popular with their Doom series, Wolfenstein, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and the sale was acquired for $7.5 billion. Next is our tech tip of the day.
This week's tech tip is to use your Windows key to quickly navigate the computer instead of mouse clicking around your desktop. So if you have a Windows 10 computer or even on Linux devices, you can hit the Windows key and it will immediately pop up a search bar in the bottom left or on the top of the screen, and you can immediately start typing whatever you want to go to on your computer. So if you want to open your web browser, hit the Windows key, type Firefox, hit enter, and Firefox pops right up.
Yeah,
or you could do it with Word as well, any program you want to.
Word, printers, if you want to do settings, you can do pretty much type anything in there that you want to, and it should get you closer to what you're looking for rather than trying to search around in the different actual settings. All right, so today's tech product is going to be talking about the differences in cameras. For the most part, we have two different categories. We have IP cameras and we have analog cameras. We also have a series of subcategory of wireless cameras, which are useful for different applications. But today we're going to be focusing on just mainly the analog cameras and the IP cameras. So both of these cameras have a lot of advantages and disadvantages. More so, the IP cameras are much better about most things. They're a little bit more expensive, but let's go through some of the pros and cons real quick. On the analog side, you're going to have a connection like this. You're going to have what they call a BNC connector, and then usually have to provide some power. These cameras have been around for a long time for CCTV systems, but while they have gotten better, they haven't really grown with the actual IP cameras. They have gotten up to like 5 megapixel in cameras, but most of them are usually between 720p, 1080p, and then a few that are 3 and 4 megapixels. So some of the pros that are good about the CCTV cameras is they're inexpensive. That's their biggest benefit. So a lot of security companies in the area and throughout the country try to push these cameras because for them, while they can still charge the same amount they would normally charge for the IP cameras, they will get these cameras for 30%, 40% off of what they would normally get for an IP camera. Another benefit for them is their larger pool of installers and vendors. Again, this is usually due to the fact that installers have been comfortable with using CCTVs and haven't switched over to IP cameras, and that's kind of a completely different beast. So they are comfortable with this, they install this, this is what they have in stock, whereas the IP cameras, they'd have to learn a whole new industry. Simplicity, these cameras are pretty simple. All you have to do is provide a video connection, like you'd think of an old yellow plug for your old TV, and then provide power. This power can be provided through the same line if you have the right line, or it can be provided supplementally through like a little just 12 volt or 18 volt power jack. And the tech is getting better on these. Like I said, they do have up to 5 megapixel cameras now, but it's still kind of sort of rare to see those. Most of the time, what they're going to be focusing on these is 1080p, which is your standard high definition, not the 5 megapixel or even the 8 megapixel for the 4K. Some of the cons, these cameras can only do a certain amount of frame rate. So the IP cameras kind of sort of standard is 30 to 60 frames per second, whereas the analog cameras kind of sort of focus on the 15 to maybe 30 frames per second, but even then it's not doing it very well. Less coverage. The IP cameras get a much better view angle or up and down angle versus a lot of the the analog cameras. And more cables are required is another con. You either got to have another power cable, or you got to have a cable that is going to run both power and video and have that plugged up to the DVR. And there's no encryption. Since these are analog cameras and it's sending the signal analog to the DVR, there's a lot less functionality. So you can't encrypt them. You can't have like facial recognition software or detection between like a cat versus like a person versus a car. So that's some of the cons for the analogs.
The cabling for these are also a lot more likely to break, and they're much less shielded to outside factors.
This one doesn't even have, for instance, it doesn't have a solid copper. This is just actually not even copper at all, but they come in these few fibers and they're very, very easy to pull apart and break. All of the IP cameras use either Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat6e, or Cat6a. We like to use Cat6e or better. Our cables are solid bare copper, and even on some of the cheaper, inexpensive kits that you get, like this is a kit here, you can buy those that come with the cable itself, but even then it's really thin wire compared to the Cat6 cable. So on the digital side, the IP cameras are better for a multitude of reasons. While they are slightly more expensive, if you're going to install a camera system in your home or business, you might as well put one in that's going to last for a really long time. These use Ethernet cables that provide the video feed and the power. You can actually get a lot more diversity with that because you can always plug in something else. Like let's say you want to plug in something later on that uses an Ethernet cord. You can just add in a switch and then add in more cameras if you want to. But once these cameras are on the network, you can do almost any you could possibly think of with them.
Yeah, the modularity of the IP cameras greatly surpasses those of the analog system.
That's correct. Cost on the IP cameras, while they were even more expensive than they are now, it's come down considerably, so they're more affordable than they used to be. You can look up probably about a 30% increase camera for camera spec-wise, close spec anyway, from like a 5 megapixel analog to an IP camera, 30 to 50% more, but again, you're getting so much more feature-wise on the cameras. The ease of installation, if you're going to get a self-install kit like this kit right here comes with the cameras, it comes with the NVR, which is network video recorder, it comes with the cabling and everything like that. But one thing I would caution against is that if you're going to come with the cable kit the way it is, it comes with these ends already terminated, and they do use inexpensive wire that isn't as good as the Cat6. If you're going to have to drill through your house or your home or a wall, it's much easier to drill the width of an actual wire and then re-terminate the ends than it is to drill a hole that this whole end's going to go through and push through and have a much bigger hole. So as far as that goes, you can drill like a 3/8 inch hole for this wire, or you can drill a 1/2 inch or hole or bigger for the cable itself. So the installation wise, if you can do that on your own, then great. But if not, we can always come out and terminate the ends for you at the very least. Intelligence and analytics, so these cameras are allowed, they're digital, so you can go through and do facial recognition software, you can do pet detection, you can do movement and motion, you can set up grids to where you want to look at certain things on certain points and not look at these items, but look at these items. Like let's say you have a flag outside that just constantly waves, so you can tell it to ignore that instance there, and you can tell it to just watch the driveway more or the front porch more. The security side, these are encryptable, so you can actually encrypt this whole feedback so that way nobody else can get into your system. And there's usually less equipment because once this is, like I said, this is on the network, you can plug these in basically anywhere you want to. And if you have a PoE switch, you can run cameras pretty much anywhere. Some of the disadvantages, the initial cost setup is slightly more on these than the analog cameras, but well worth it as we mentioned before. Storage. Since you are getting a higher resolution, like let's say for instance, you have a 1080p camera and you want to switch to a 4 or 5 megapixel camera, well, to get the same amount of storage without changing anything else, you're going to need about twice the amount of storage space as you would on an analog camera that's only doing 1080p. The same is true for if you're going from frame rates from 15 frames per second to 30 frames per second, you're going to need double the storage. So for instance, if this camera right here gives you a week's of recording on a 1 terabyte drive, if you're going to go from this camera being 1080p to this camera being a 5 megapixel, you're going to only get either 3.5 days, or if you do that plus go from 15 frames per second to 30 frames per second, you're going to go down to like a day and a half to 2 days. All right, so a few more items about the difference between IP and analog. Resolution-wise, these are almost always going to be better resolution. You can get these in I mean, you can get them in 1080p if you want to, but I would not go below 5 megapixel. You can get them easily in 5 megapixel or 4K, which is 8 megapixels. The compression ratio, these have gotten better. So whereas these are analog and have just a solid feedback, the compression ratio on these have come down considerably, so that'll help compensate for the fact that you're going from analog to digital. And they have H.265 and H.265 plus compression now. IK rating. So the IK rating is basically the vandal-proof rating. For anything that you guys feel it could be vandalized, whether it be a camera that's outside or something that's in a jail cell, you want to have IK10 or higher. So it's IK10 or IK10 plus, which means it can handle a certain amount of, actually like a hammer or a collision with the camera without breaking. You want to talk about frame rate?
Yeah. So most IP cameras can record between about 30 and 60 frames per second. What you set is dependent on how much storage are available. When you're putting in a new system, you want to put in definitely enough storage to suffice for the cameras you have now, but maybe even cameras that you get in the future. Like we mentioned, the analog cameras over here, probably right around 15 frames per second. So definitely a step down from the IP cameras. Yeah,
these usually get 10 to 15 frames per second. More, but it's really taxing on them to go above 15 frames per second. The IP rating is another feature that the cameras have. It doesn't matter whose it is, but the IP rating is basically the dust and waterproof and water intrusion protection. That goes from 2 different numbers. There's an IP and then 1 digit and IP another digit. So for instance, these would be like IP66, which means that they are complete protection against dust, and then the 6 would be protection against strong jets of water in all directions. So we recommend getting IP66 or higher for outdoor applications. So if you're getting like dust, snow, water intrusion, we don't like to go below IP66. IP67 is even better, but I would get one of the 2 or better. So IP66, IP67, or IP68 would be the ones I would get for outdoor applications. And then last but not least, the digital cameras have a wide range of digital features like WDR, which stands for wide dynamic range. Infrared is much better on the digital cameras as far as like detection, trying to find out what people are doing. There's a bunch of different features that you can get on digital cameras that you cannot get on the analogs. And lastly, if you're looking for a good camera system, every camera has a 1-year warranty, but the really good cameras have a 2-year or 3-year warranty or better.
So when you get these cameras, you can get traditional bullets here that this one's tightened down pretty good, but they can go back and forth and they twist a little bit. This one is a traditional dome camera that twists, given its ability to do so in this dome shape. And then you can get what's called a PTZ camera.
Correct.
Pan, tilt, and zoom. And they're on basically
gyro, yeah.
Yeah, a gyro. That's what I was looking for.
Allows you to actually, someone would just do pan and tilt, someone will do zoom, but allows you to either zoom in optically or digitally. There's just a ton of different features on these kind of cameras, which we prefer the IP side way more than we do the old analog side. We can still work on this system, but just not a fan. If you guys can switch out your cameras to the digital side, please make the switch whenever you can. Thank you guys for tuning in to our show today. Appreciate your viewership, and tune in next week. Thank you.
Till next time.